Twilight was doing her best to understand the free pictures before her meant. Each picture was a distorted mess of colors and shapes. At the time she had fought, she had been able to make out the vague shapes of a pony or some other shape she could identify as an object, but quickly moved back to being distorted blob. I can't make the heads or tails of this. Twilight was groaning as she looked back and forth. How does exactly this spell works? This is my second time doing it, and I'm still confused. The book didn't explain any further of how to perform the spell and its purpose. What was it so easy to figure out? Should something have been obvious to her? There were no instructions on how to interpret the pictures, or what she could do to help. It really seemed like she was purposely being kept out, as if she wasn't allowed to see what her friends were experiencing. If I had to write something with, I could make better notes, but I would have nothing to compare this to. Only the other two pictures. Ugh, I can't learn like this. Twilight groaned as she sat down, stared up a little frustrated at the pictures. She wanted nothing more than to figure this out, and to learn, so she had to help her friends better. Without a frame of reference, it seemed pointless. Just as she was getting frustrated, each of the pictures began to eradicate with a bright white light. Twilight tried to look at this development, but the light became too much for her to bear. She closed her eyes, just as the familiar tug of the spell ending. She was dragged backwards, but out of the spiraling darkness that just carried of the free paintings, before finding herself to thrust back into reality. Ugh! Twilight groaned as she rubbed her forehead. It was unsettling feeling to feel like pulled into that. Every pony okay? She asked, opening her eyes to look at her three friends. Yay! It worked! We're back! Pinkie said excitedly, jumping up and down, smiling as she looked around. Aha! Take that, you creepy old world, you! Rainbow Dash grinned. That was really eye-opening, Fluttershy smiled softly, putting a hoof to her chin and thought. So, the spell worked? You were able to figure out why you were having nightmares, Fluttershy? Twilight asked, looking at her friend curiously. Twilight felt herself becoming the center of the attention as every mare looked at her in anticipation. She blushed softly. Yes, I found out the reason, Fluttershy admitted slowly. Well, don't leave us in suspense. What was it? Rainbow asked, eager to find out. Whoa, hold on, Dashy, Pinkie said, stepping closer. If it's anything like me finding out when I lost my sister, we shouldn't force her to say it if she wasn't ready. Though, I admit, I am really curious as to what it is. It's probably something hug-worthy. Oh, Fluttershy rubbed her leg awkwardly with her hoof. Fluttershy stumbled and thought, to tell you what, there's something I need to do. Something I need to take care of, and then I could tell you. I hope, she said the last part quietly. That's a completely understandable, Pinkie said, embracing Fluttershy into a group hug. But just so you know, whatever it is, we're always here for you. Yeah, sorry I didn't mean to sound pushy. Tell us when you're ready. Rainbow smiled supportively. Thank you, all of you, Fluttershy said, smiling, with tears at the back of her eyes. I don't know what I'd do without you girls. She embraced Pinkie Pie back. Well, I'm glad I could help. Twilight smiled. Yeah, about that, Pinkie said, letting go of Fluttershy, then looking at the two. I think we're in agreement here, Pinkie, Rainbow Dash said, looking at Pinkie. Yes, I do think we are, Fluttershy nodded agree. Twilight? Pinkie started. Huh? Twilight asked, confused. All three mares then looked at each other, took a deep breath. Before one big cry, they aimlessly shouted, Don't ever use that spell again! So, why are we going to Cloudsdale? Rainbow asked curiously, looking at Fluttershy, as the two of them were flying towards the city in the clouds. Well, I guess I could tell you, Fluttershy said, before letting out a soft sigh and smiling. I'm going to see my father. Your father? Rainbow asked curiously. I don't think I ever met him. Heck, you haven't even told me much about your family. You always avoided that subject when I asked. That does make sense, Fluttershy said softly. Does this have something to do with some freakish nightmare version of Ponyville? Rainbow asked hesitantly. The gears turning in her head as she thought. It does, Fluttershy said softly, trying not to alarm Dash. She wasn't ready to say too much about what she saw, Not until she at least had confronted her father. Rainbow had looked at Fluttershy and flew carefully, quietly, waiting her to say nothing more, although she realized it wasn't coming. Rainbow let out a sigh. Are you going to explain things right? Pinkie didn't explain anything more than she'd lost her sister to come to a serial killer. She didn't mean the monsters in the town. I literally really want to know what happened to you, Fluttershy, after you got separated from us. I was so worried, Rainbow said, still feeling guilty about having to yell at Pinkie Pie. I promise, Dash. I'll tell you everything. Fluttershy then looked down sadly. Just promise me you won't think I'm a monster. Rainbow looked shocked, as if she almost offended the idea. How could I ever think of that? You're the nicest, kindest, most gentle pony of all of Ponyville. Heck, maybe in all of Equestria. How could I think you were ever a monster? Rainbow shook her head, confused. Thank you, Dash. Fluttershy held back a tear from spilling. We're almost there, Fluttershy said, as they were now flew close to the Cloud City. Cloudsdale was a bit of a normal buzz with Pegasi ponies all around. Some were working on new construction, some were delivering packages, and others were just simply out enjoying the weather, while others seemed to be in a hurry. It was a normal day for Cloudsdale. Fluttershy then looked at the school in the distance as they flew past it. She could hear the familiar bell ringings from anywhere at the schoolhouse, suddenly poured out with excited young foals that were eager to be let out of school for the day to go off to play. It brought a smile to Fluttershy, seeing all the happy faces of youth. It seemed to lift their spirits. There it is, the place where my father works, Cloudsdale General, Fluttershy said as she flew in around for a few more seconds of flying. She wanted to point the large building with the large red cross on it. It had several Pegasi flying around out, some healthy and some sick, with some bandages on the limbs. There was an emergency vehicle that sat parked next to what seemed to be a pulled-up team of Pegasi, that should be emergency calls be made. Is your father a doctor? Rainbow Dash asked, as they sat down just outside of the front doors before walking inside. You could say that, Fluttershy said, smiling softly. The lobby was large, very large. There was a huge space above their heads for the Pegasi to fly around. A large fountain in the middle that seemed to have a few bits of floating in its depths. A receptionist desk that had loads of ponies checking in, waiting in the area for ponies to fill out the paperwork and wait for their heads when they are needed. And the noticeable part of the room was a very large picture of the receptionist's desk, over light amber Pegasus, with the dark red mane with the white lab coat, imposing with blue eyes. Underneath the picture was a plague, but although it was difficult for her to read from afar. Well, that's a large photo, Rainbow said, chucking the size of it. They must really like that doctor. Well, he has saved hundreds of ponies' lives. He's the best doctor in the whole hospital. Fluttershy stopped where she was walking, making Dash stop and look back at her curiously. His name is Lance Stronshy, and he is my father. Rainbow's mouth hung out open agape before looking at her at the large picture, then back at Fluttershy, doing this several times in disbelief. You mean your father is the Lance Stronshy? Oh my god, he's the famous doctor of all of Cloudsdale. Even I've heard of him. It was even said when a terrible lightning storm broke loose from the weather center, injured at least 30 ponies, that Lance was able to save all of them, and when the other doctor couldn't save them. Yes, I'm familiar with that day, Fluttershy said, nodding slowly with her memories of her foalhood had returned now. All she could remember was almost everything about it. He's always been one of the best doctors. I even only got a little closer when he poured his passion into studying medicine after his wife died of Rainbow Dash then stopped in the tracks in realization that hit her like a ton of bricks. She was speaking about Fluttershy's mom. Oh, Fluttershy, I had no idea. Rainbow began to started to apologize. It's okay, Dash, Fluttershy said with a sad smile, then walked past Dash, heading for the counter. There is a lot I have to tell you. You'll understand soon. Hello, welcome to Cloudsdale General. How can I help? The nurse turned behind the desk began to say, having a nose deep in her paperwork and looking to look up, seeing Fluttershy standing there. Hello, Nurse Soft Cure. covering for the receptionist today? Fluttershy offered a genuine smile as she could, looking at the white-coated Pegasus with the blonde mane. After all, this was the first time she had seen her personal full-hood nurse since she had visited the hospital so many years ago. Soft Nurse Cure narrowed her eyes, immediately giving Fluttershy a nasty glare. "What are you doing here?" a nurse almost hissed. Rainbow Dash raised an eyebrow. The nurse's behavior, this seemed very rude, considering that she was talking to the daughter of the best doctor in the hospital. "I've come to see my father today, if he's not busy, that is," Fluttershy explained simply. The nurse's hooves banged hard against the desk. Almost every pony turned their heads to look at this. Not having to expect loud bangs in the middle of the hospital, Nurse Softcure looked around quickly before offering a weak smile and a soft laugh, as if it had been by accident. The other Pegasi seemed to shrug it off before continuing to their own duties. Once no pony was paying their attention to them, she went back to glaring at Fluttershy. "So what, after all these years, you just come waltzing in here, not expecting an audience, but expecting me to believe that's all you're here for?" Softcure was trying not to yell, but her voice came out a harsh whisper. "Hey, who do you think you're talking to?" Rainbow Dash said, feeling her fury started to stand out on end, but was stopped by a hoof player down on Fluttershy. "I swear to you, Miss Cure, I'm only here to speak with my father." Fluttershy smiled in the face at the hate that was coming from the nurse. "Oh yeah? Like I believe that," Nurse Cure growled. "You're just here to smear Glance's good name, aren't you? Try to interfere with his life-saving work because of some bitter vengeance you want." Again, Rainbow wanted to speak, but was stopped by Fluttershy. "You can accompany me if you want. I really want nothing more than a chance to talk to my father. I won't say a word to any pony else, I promise," Fluttershy explained calmly. Nurse Softcure just glared at Fluttershy, but it seemed to be thinking the situation over her head. Her eyes wandered over to Rainbow Dash, who seemed to be only giving her glaring dagger backs. It took a while, but the nurse finally responded. "Fine, I'll escort you to his office." The nurse got up from her sitting position behind a desk before spreading her wings. She began to fly down one of the hallways towards the air paths to the upper levels. "Yeesh, what's her problem?" Dash growled as the two of them began to follow after the nurse. "It's a long story. I'll tell you later." Fluttershy smiled softly. Rainbow Dash didn't seem pleased, but listened to Fluttershy as they flew. The nurse directed them up several stories before stopping at the 9th. She flew down the long hallway that barely had a soul in it. She only passed a single other Pegasi as they drew closer. "Here, his office." Softcure stopped outside of the office doors, turning to face the two mares. "I'll let him know that you two are here to see him," he explained before turning to knock on the door. "Come in," a gruff voice said. Nurse Softcure opened the door and walked in before closing the door behind her. "I don't feel of this Fluttershy," Rainbow whispered, with displeasure in this situation. "Something doesn't feel right." "I understand, Dash. I promise this will be over soon. Just let me talk to my father in private for now. If I need you, you'll know," Fluttershy said, nuzzling against Rainbow Dash for support. "I'd rather go in with you, but if you say so," Rainbow said, nuzzling her back. The door opened once more. Cure came out. "He'll see you now," she said, standing next to the door glaring at the two of them. "Thank you," Fluttershy smiled softly before walking up to the door. She took in a deep breath to draw in the strength before carefully opening the door and walking inside. The office wasn't too different from the last time she'd seen it. There was still the desk, with books lining up against the walls, many of the books stacked upon each other around the office, as if it recently read. One of the books lay open on the desk, and was currently in the middle of being read. There behind the desk, looking up with her with red eyes, was the familiar amber coat with dark red mane of her father. He looked up, almost as if disbelief, and that she was actually there, standing before him after all these years. "Hello, father. It's me, Fluttershy," Fluttershy said nicely as she could. So you're here." Lance let out a soft sigh, moving out from behind his desk and walking around to get a better look at her. "You've certainly grown a lot since the last time I saw you." He looked up and down at her, scanning her. "You resemble your mother so much now." Her father then turned his head away from her, closing his eyes. Why are you here? I came here to talk, Fluttershy spoke softly, about what happened between us. What's there to say? You killed your mother, and I hurt you because of it. The words he said coldly, as if he didn't care to say them, let alone think them. You really remembered all that, do you? So what's there to say? I guess I came here to apologize. Fluttershy smiled, a sad, soft smile. Apologize? Her father said, almost looking confused as he turned to his daughter. I'm sorry I killed Mom. Fluttershy lowered her head softly. I could never take it back. What I've done, no amount of apologies will bring her back, but I did kill her, and I'm so sorry. There was silence in the room. Fluttershy could only feel the cold stare of her father as he looked at her, as if trying to figure out what was going on. Are you going to try and seek redemption now? He finally spoke in his cold voice, trying to make up for what you did so long ago. After all these years, you come back to this? Anger was starting to rise in the back of his voice. I guess that's not all, Fluttershy admitted, lifting her head up and smiling. I also came here to let you know that I forgive you as well. This seemed to stop the older stallion where he stood. You punished me for what I did to Mother, and well, I still feel that it was an unworthy punishment. I did a terrible thing, so it was only befitting that I had a fitting punishment, and didn't hold any of that anger for what you did to me. In fact, I was able to find a wonderful life thanks to what you did. I've had so many friends who love me so much now. I could take care of the animals in Ponyville, you know. I put all the knowledge and I have learned it from your medical books to good use. Fluttershy smiled happily as she fought back to her life in Ponyville. I was even able to find love in Ponyville. I don't know where it's heading out, but it's a journey I'm going to enjoy all the way. And I wouldn't have met the love of my life if you hadn't done what you did. I owe you everything in my life to you, Father, and I want to thank you. Fluttershy gave out a soft bow. Thank you for everything. Lanston just stared at his daughter. He could still remember the night his wife was taken from him, the monster that had ended his wife's life. He remembered how much pain and suffering he had inflicted on that monster, and how after he had put so much work into studying medicine and practicing his craft so he could save any pony, regardless of the condition or disease. But now that monster was bowing before him, thanking him for everything that happened in her life, apologizing for taking the mare he had brought him to the greatest amount of happiness he had ever known. He gritted his teeth and felt the anger swelling inside of him. He stared at her with a maddening intent. He saw her slowly lifted her head up with a smile. That smile, it sounded like it was digging into his very soul. He took a step forward as he took a breath out of his nose, raising his hoof in the air. He wanted to strike her. He wanted to make her hurt more, and he wanted to know what happened tore all of his soul. And as he looked into the face of that every patient he had saved, Fluttershy smiled softly, looking at her father. She closed her eyes, ready to be struck. She would take any punishment. He seemed to be befitting her, and for her that he always has. The only thing she could do was to make amends for his past, having taken her mother out of this world. She waited for the blow, expecting it to come, but the strike never came. Instead, Fluttershy felt next surprised her. Her father gently placed his hooves on her back, drawing her closer to embrace her. Wrapping his hooves around her, she blinked in surprise when she felt him start to shake. She wasn't sure how to react. She suddenly felt something cool and wet hit her back. He was crying. Her father was crying as he embraced her. Fluttershy couldn't help herself as she moved her hooves around her father and hugged him back, closing her eyes as she let him cry into her head needed. The two of them stood there, that embrace of what seemed like an eternity, and when her father finally broke away from it, rubbing his face as he turned away from his daughter. Fluttershy, he finally said, after clearing his throat. Yes? She asked curiously. I think it's best if we never see each other again, he muttered quietly. Please don't ever come and visit me again. All right, I understand. Fluttershy slowly nodded her head. Just know that, Dad, I love you. I love you too, he choked out. Now, get out of my office. Fluttershy didn't need to be told twice. She gave one last bow before moving to his door to open it. Well, that was a quick visit, Softcure said, looking at Fluttershy curiously. Fluttershy's emergence was the only thing that had stopped the constant glare battle between Softcure and Rainbow Dash. Yes, but don't worry, Miss Cure. You won't be ever seeing me again. Fluttershy smiled to her nurse. What, really? You're not going to smear his name? The nurse said in surprise. Miss Cure, I understand now that what you did it all because you didn't want anything bad to happen to my father. But if something had happened, he couldn't save all the lives of the lives he saved over the last years. Fluttershy smiled, but Softcure just turned her head, almost as she was being stabbed by Fluttershy's words. I don't blame you. He saved so many lives. The one he seemed to hurt more insignificant in comparison. Fluttershy chuckled softly. Get on with it, Softcure growled. I'm sorry, I just needed to say it, Fluttershy said. Please have a wonderful life and look after my father. Fluttershy gave a small bow before walking off. Fluttershy, Rainbow spoke up after a while. What the hey was all that about? I guess I can explain to you now, Dash. Fluttershy smiled happily. But let's go somewhere more private first. Rainbow and Fluttershy landed on top of the hill in the middle of a large field that expanded far out to the horizon. Only one could see the mountains in the distance, and the flowers were blooming on the field below. It was a beautiful sight, one that was tranquil, without other pony around to be seen. This seems like a good place, Fluttershy smiled, as she laid herself down, turning over to a nearby forest. You know, over there is where I fell from the Cloudsdale, and I learned a very special talent of taking care of animals. She gave a small chuckle. Huh? Isn't it? Rainbow Dash sat down next to Fluttershy, looking at the forest. The sight did bring her back fond memories, but it's not what she was concerned about at the moment. Okay, Fluttershy, will you tell me that now we're alone, the nurse was glaring daggers at you? I didn't like it one bit. Also, what did you see in that other Ponyville that war-ranted trip to Cloudsdale? Rainbow quickly asked, wanting answers. Fluttershy could only offer a sad smile as she felt the wind blowing through her mane. She closed her eyes as she began to speak. I suppose you know that my mother died of a disease, right? Fluttershy asked, just wanting to double check with what Rainbow knew. Yeah, I was too young to remember, but it was big news one day, and of course every day I hear ponies talking about him. They almost seem to mention how he tragically lost his wife, and it made him want to become an even better doctor, Rainbow explained slowly. Well, here's the truth, Rainbow Dash. My mother didn't die of a disease. Rainbow then looked at her curiously. It's true that she was sick with a disease, to which had no cure, and it likely would have killed her eventually. But that's not what killed her. For what you see, I killed her. I killed my own mother, Rainbow Dash. Rainbow Dash's mouth fell agape open once more as she stared at Fluttershy. Fluttershy wasn't even looking at her. She was just staring out into the field with a soft yet sad smile. Any question of doubt ran through her head, which it hit with a sad look. She wasn't lying. Fluttershy had actually done what she did. But why? Why would you... Rainbow stuttered, trying to process it. Wait, what? What drove you to that kindest pony ever to kill your own mother? She asked me to, Fluttershy replied slowly. What? Rainbow was set in shock once more. You mean your mother asked you to kill her as your young daughter to kill her? Fluttershy just nodded slowly in her head. Fluttershy, that doesn't make you the killer. Rainbow stomped her hoof. You were too young to know the difference. If she made you kill her, then you had no ability to stop yourself. You didn't kill your mother. She killed... But I did kill her, Rainbow Dash. Fluttershy closed her eyes slowly. Even if she told me to as a child, I had to listen to her. I still had the sense in me to know what I was doing was wrong, but it didn't felt right. But I chose not to want to disappoint my mother. I took the knife she gave me, and I stabbed her repeatedly. No matter how would you look at it, the motives or the reasons. My mother died because I stabbed her multiple times. If I hadn't had the knife, if I hadn't moved my legs in that stabbing motion, If I hadn't listened to her, then she'd still be alive today. Fluttershy's smile stayed on her face, the sad smile that was forcing herself to be okay with everything she did. I'm simply a monster, Rainbow Dash. No! Rainbow shouted, stomping her hoof against the ground before grabbing Fluttershy by the shoulders. Much to her surprise, she had already turned around, looked at the Pegasus to face her. You're not a monster. Your mother forced you to do that, Fluttershy. As the most gentle pony of all of Equestria, you're not capable of murder. Unless you didn't know what you were doing, you're not a monster, Rainbow breathed heavily as she ranted. Fluttershy then looked in shock for a moment, before smiling gently. She was so happy that Rainbow cared for her so deeply, despite having admitted of a monstrous truth to her. She could feel her tears burning at the edges of her eyes, but she held them back as she closed her eyes. Well, my father told me I was. This seemed to shut Rainbow up again as she stared at Fluttershy in shock. He didn't just tell me I was a monster. He punished me as the monster I was. After all, you don't argue with the best doctor of all of Cloudsdale. He knows what's best for you. I don't have any scars because he knew what he was doing. But I visit the hospital so often because of his punishments. Fluttershy let out a small laugh. She apparently found that statement to be funny. That was when Nurse Softcure comes in. She was my father's head nurse. Whenever I came in for one of the accidents, she was the one who helped me. However, she was loyal to my father, but if I tried to tell her that my father was the one who'd been doing all this to me, she'd only hurt me in return. Forcing me to never speak about the words I said about my father was a horrible person. And I understood why now. She was protecting the people my father was caring for. I remember passing by the rooms of the patients one day, and at the time when I was attending to a cancer patient, to all the other doctors, they said they had no chance of healing her, but my father said he wasn't going to give up on her until the very end. Another patient complicated organ replacement that other surgeons were too afraid to perform because one move could kill her, but my father took upon it himself and saved her life. Tears were flowing down Fluttershy's cheeks as she spoke of her deeds her father had accomplished. There was a little filly with a weak immune system, and she had given up on life and was dying, and her father gave her a hope that she never had before. She made a full recovery. There was even one time when she was able to help a mother who was going to kill her baby in labor. But he was there and he knew that the baby would come out as healthy as it could be. Rainbow could say nothing, and she was then staring down and crying mare before as she poured her heart out about her father. They were all the patients I saw with my own eyes, Rainbow Dash. I saw him smile and laugh and help them all. Even after I killed my own mother, he never once showed that sign of sorrow to them. So what could be done with the monster now, Rainbow Dash? I deserve everything that happened to me. I did the unforgivable and killed my mother. Fluttershy then closed her eyes. A small laugh, its tears began to stream down her face. No, 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 no! Rainbow Dash began to scream as she lowered her head. Fluttershy then looked at her surprise. Rainbow Dash began to shake as she felt the tears running at the edges of her eyes. Fluttershy, you're not a monster! Rainbow Dash looked straight into Fluttershy's water-filled cyan eyes. Even if it's true, even if you did kill your mother, that doesn't make you a monster. You could never hurt a fly unless you were given no other choice, no other option, unless your back was on the wall and you could never harm anything, another living being. So stop saying The tears ran down Rainbow Dash's cheeks and hindered now. Stop speaking like some horrible pony that deserves to be punished when you're not. You're the nicest, gentlest, kindest pony who's ever lived. Rainbow's shoulder shook as she spoke. Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy muttered quietly, looking at her with sorrowful eyes. The two sat on the grassy hill, looking at each other's eyes as they sat there crying. There were no words to be had at this moment. Just the bond that was between the two mares set up. As the sun began to set in the horizon, between the two breathless mares, They shared a deep kiss on that hill. Each mare could feel the passion that had radiated from the other through the kiss. It wasn't just a kiss out of longing or lust, or a simple understanding or care. It was a kiss out of deep love, a love that was rooted in their hearts. The night sky had begun to become visible as the two finally broke apart their kiss, Fluttershy nestling herself into Rainbow's coat. "Thank you, Rainbow Dash," Fluttershy said quietly. Rainbow Dash just smiled at her mare friend, petting her coat softly. The two stayed together for a short while. It was Fluttershy that broke the silence between them. "We're not done yet," she said softly. "Huh?" Rainbow asked curiously as Fluttershy stood up. "This time we need to talk about you." Fluttershy wiped her eyes. "About your dream to become a Wonderbolt." "Oh," Rainbow grimaced, not wanting to have brought back the topic up just yet. She looked up at Fluttershy, who was smiling at her, and then up at the sky, then down to the ground and gritted her teeth as she closed her eyes before letting out a soft sigh. "I'm not going to. I want you to try out for the Wonderbolts." Fluttershy smiled happily. "Huh?" Rainbow blinked in confusion. But I told you before. If I join the Wonderbolts, I'll be abandoning my friends and the ponies I care about." Rainbow Dash felt like she was shrinking as she spoke. "That'd be I'm abandoning you." "I've been thinking it over despite my own thoughts," Fluttershy smiled. "And there is a 1-year training program, right? Well, as far as I know, they're not allowed to keep you away forever. And by law, they must give you opportunities to rest, take breaks from working. You get sick days, vacation days, rest days, holidays, and even once you're a part of the main flight team, they won't do shows during the winter. And not like every other team member flies during every show, and all that down, you'll get to use that to spend with us." Rainbow Dash blinked. How do you know all this?" Rainbow asked, flabbergasted at Fluttershy's level of knowledge about the Wonderbolts. Fluttershy could only laugh. "I've been listening to your rant about them since we were fillies, Rainbow Dash. I've remembered most of what you said about them. I just looked important details from each rant and brought them together." Fluttershy nodded slowly. "Just because you'll be gone for a while at a time doesn't mean you'll be abandoning your home or your friends. And you especially won't be abandoning me." I hadn't thought about it like that," Rainbow said, thinking it all over in her head now. In the other Ponyville, it had been a present to her such as a black and white way that couldn't be helped, but what felt like was shown was true. But here, Fluttershy was mixing the black and white line, causing it to all become an obnoxious gray blur. "You're right, Fluttershy. You're absolutely right," Rainbow Dash said as her enthusiastic grin came to her face. "Yes," she cried out, jumping up into the air, doing a flip, and pumping her hooves into the air. "The dream is alive, and I'm going to be a Wonderbolt," Rainbow cheered. "That's wonderful, Dash," Fluttershy laughed happily, watching Dash. "I've come up with my own dream too, one that I want to make come true very soon." "Oh, what's your dream, Fluttershy?" Rainbow asked as she flew down to Fluttershy, smiling happily. "I've decided that I'm going to become a mother," Fluttershy explained. Rainbow's wings stopped moving and fell to the ground before Fluttershy. I can't give you a child," Rainbow Dash cried out in panic. Fluttershy couldn't help but laugh. "I meant I'd like to adopt a little filly or a colt of my own," Fluttershy explained more clearly. "Oh," Rainbow sat up, understanding now. "I don't know, Fluttershy. Full is a lot of work. A lot more than trying to be a Wonderbolt. It's plus being me with your mare friend. You know I'd like to help take care of it." Rainbow rubbed the back of her head and thought, "I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of responsibility." "It's okay, Dash. I wouldn't ask you to do anything if you're not comfortable with." Fluttershy smiled happily. You have my way of twisting my heart." Rainbow then put a hoof onto her face before smiling. "But if a foal is what you want then I can't do anything but say go for it. Let's just consider our options first." "Options?" Fluttershy blinked, tilting her head a little. "You know, we could," Rainbow thought that she was going to say. "Well, I could say we could always ask Twilight about, pregnancy spells between two mares. but I think I want to avoid Twilight's spells for a little while. Rainbow grimaced, missed Fluttershy, but she couldn't help but laugh at this as well. It's alright, whatever it's from you or someone else. All I know is I want to give this some little filly or colt a wonderful foalhood, one I didn't have growing up. Fluttershy nuzzled against Rainbow Dash. I know. Rainbow let out a soft chuckle as she embraced her mare friend. Hey, it's getting late. We should probably head back to Ponyville, Rainbow said as a cool breeze ran through her mane, reminding her of the time. Alright, let's go. Fluttershy smiled up at Rainbow. The two of them then soon took off from the hill, flying back to Ponyville together.